you know if it's true or not. Was there at the time of that passage being written, like 153 or 154 known nations?
Yeah, I've never come across that. Yeah. If you come across that, I'd like to see it though. Greg.
My question. We have Genesis 6, and we have the flood, 5 separate now.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the conquest narratives where what we learned from your book is, you know, Joshua was told to wipe out certain people groups because of the Nephilim.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the sons of God, daughters of men instances. But there's another passage where he wipes everybody out except for a couple survivors, and it's Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no connection biblically speaking. Is there intertestamental literature that has some kind of a Genesis 6 flavor to that Sodom and Gomorrah event? And the second question, what's with this whole pillar of salt thing?
Yeah. The questions about the Sodom and Gomorrah incident, is there some connection between that and the Genesis 6 and then the pillar of salt thing? I have not come across a specific connection to that other than, you know, the reference to angels there. So again, as of right now, I don't see one. I just haven't come across one. You know, I can't say I've looked at it as much as I've looked at other things, but I would think that if there's something there, I probably would have come across it, but you know, who knows? Pillar of salt thing. I mean, I tend to read that pretty straightforwardly. I don't think there's anything, you know, terribly cryptic in it. I do think that, you know, it's, you know, do we have to view Lot's wife as turning into a pillar of salt, you know, or is this sort of a play on words, you know, to make us think of the Dead Sea later on? Is that really what you're getting at? There will be some who argue the latter, that the language there is sort of deliberate to make us think of the specific geographical region. Well, the problem with that is scholars don't really know conclusively where Sodom and Gomorrah were. One possible location is the Dead Sea, which is associated with the salt and all that. So, you know, there might be something to that, but I tend to just, you know, read it as, you know, for what it says. This is the way God decided to punish her, so that she would become an emblem, you know, of disobedience. And I don't know, there might be something more to it. I just haven't come across it yet.
Well, doesn't Luke 17 kind of link the days of Noah and the Sodom and Gomorrah story?
Go ahead.
Well, it says, you know, was in the days of Noah, so will be the days of the Son of Man, you know, marrying and stuff. And then right after that, Jesus says the Lot and the Gomorrah.
Yeah, that's my wife, by the way. We'll talk about that later. No, I think the connection there is the angels, and the reason angels had a significant role to play in eschatology generally. And so I think that's why those instances are grouped together, because they both concern angelic presence, you know, in judgment, specifically in judgment. You know, I talk a little bit about this in again, the last section of the book, because there are passages in the Old Testament that very specifically link in conjunction with the day of the Lord. Again, it's an important biblical concept. The day of the Lord is, again, the time of the end, where all the enemies of God get punished and all the righteous, you know, they turn out to be rewarded in either in this life or the next, and so on and so forth. Everything wrong is made right, everything right, you know, it is. So we tend to think of that in terms of the way we're taught about Armageddon, this big battle, you know, on the earth. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but there are passages like Isaiah 34, Isaiah 24, that refer to this final conflict as involving angels, divine beings, okay? The stars of heaven, you know, the holy ones, okay, come with the Lord, you know, down to earth to punish not only the host on earth, but the host of heaven in heaven. And it's a reference to the fact that when God cleans house, this isn't the only house that gets cleaned. In other words, the earthly sphere is going to be judged, but also the spiritual world is going to get the same treatment. And so for that reason, you have angels often referenced with this time of the end kind of stuff because they have a specific role to play. And it's judgment. Genesis 6, Sodom and Gomorrah, that sort of thing. But anything more specific, going back to the first 4 verses of Genesis 6, I haven't come across anything there yet. Yes, sir.
So expanding on what you just mentioned, divine intervention. What are your thoughts about that with regards to the timeline that you've expressed in both your writings as well as some of your studies as well?
What do you mean by timeline?
Nothing by accident, coincidence, happenstance.
Mhm.
Everything for a purpose of reason to function. How does that carry through into your writings?
Are you talking about the theme of providence, just generally? Yeah. The question is how does sort of the providence, I guess, in general, and maybe in the flow of events, factor into what I write about? It's a big deal in the fiction because one of the things I want to communicate in the fiction is I think a better sense, a greater sense of providence, just generally. We have this impression that God only shows up in the spectacular. Oh, we prayed for this person and they got healed. God showed up. Whereas, we prayed for this person and they didn't get healed. Where was God? Again, we talk this way as though God is only around and only doing something when there's something spectacular going on. I think that is a deeply flawed view of God. God is typically in the non-spectacular. I think we don't put enough evidence on the unseen hand. That's typically the way God works. Because again, this is why, and I brought it up in interviews before, I like movies like It's a Wonderful Life or Mr. Destiny, or these things where something in the story changes about a character's life, and then you get to see what his life would have been had that moment been different. Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. I like those because I think they teach some good theology. That in this respect, that we often don't think about our lives as being where you are today is a result of many thousands of decisions that you've made and decisions that other people have made, not only that but people you don't know. Because every decision ripples through a countless number of lives, and you're caught up in this torrent. Okay, and it matters. And if you've read Unseen Realm, I talk a lot about the concept of imaging and free will and how what you do matters. And this is the way God has built the universe. God hasn't built a universe where he either has to or needs to go in there and just destroy everything to make it work. That is counter to the biblical model. So again, if we thought of ourselves this way, we might have a more renewed sense of purpose. What I actually do today is actually going to matter. It might matter in the next 5 minutes after I do it. It might matter 5 years from now. But that isn't my job to know how it matters. My job is just to understand that it does matter and that God will use it, because God doesn't we're not robots. He didn't make us this way. We can't image God if everything is predestined.
Therefore, you can't spell
Okay, you cannot be an imager of God if you do not have free will. Okay, this is communicable attributes theology 101. Okay, you can't do that because you cease to be in God's image at that point. It's why God doesn't deal with evil by eliminating you. Why doesn't God just eliminate evil? Well, to do that, he'd have to eliminate not only all of us, but everything else in the spiritual world, because everything is derivative. Everything is why we get the plurals in Genesis 1. Spiritual beings are created as images of God. He shares his attributes with them. They represent him in their world as we do in our world. We share the communicable attributes of God. Why is there evil? It's because God decided to do that. God decided to not make us robots. He knows what the cost is going to be because he's omniscient. Okay, he knows what the cost is going to be. But he would rather have that cost happen than not have us at all. Those are the choices. So, everything is not nailed down. 1 Samuel 23 is the example I like because it's the most clear. I just don't know how you can miss it. Where God foreknows two things that never happen. That tells you immediately that foreknowledge does not necessitate predestination because they didn't happen. If it did necessitate predestination, they would have had to have happened. Again, it's not complicated stuff. It's just, again, we're not really being asked to think about a lot of it. So, back to your question, it's like that's how I think, at least how I try to think, of life. What you do is going to ripple out. And God will use other people, he'll use divine beings, he'll use his spirit, and he may actually get into the act himself on occasion. Again, the minimal occasions of the spectacular. He can do that if he wants, but he doesn't need to. And he will influence everything, people, to the end to which he desires. People rebel all the time. The agents he uses can rebel. They do frequently. Okay, God's solution isn't, I'm so frustrated now, I'm just going to destroy everyone. Okay, that isn't the solution. God will work the plan. And things will move inexorably toward the end to which God wants them to go. So in the novels, I try to play with that. Again, I don't want to go into scenes, but there are just scenes where something that happened like 10 years ago that was like completely incomprehensible makes total sense now. And not only does it make sense, but nothing else could have happened here to make this outcome work. Just that kind of thing. I love, to put that sort of thing in fiction because I do think that's the way life actually works. But again, we tend to view God as this vending machine, or this like this box, that if I push the button, like the slot machine, if I push the buttons long enough, I'm going to get a jackpot. I'm going to see something work. Okay, that just isn't. It's really deeply flawed. So that's important. And academically, I can discuss passages, but I think the fiction is a little better for that. Yeah. Oh, we'll go over here. We'll move this direction. Go ahead.
What is the significance of the sin of Balaam being mentioned in both Peter and Jude when they quote Enoch?
I mean, you do. I know. I'm sorry. What is? This is brutal, isn't it? What is the significance of the sin of Balaam when Peter and Jude mention it? I think there is a broad and perhaps a more narrow reason why it's on their minds. I mean, broadly, it's rebellion. Broadly, there is this sense of this is one of the avenues in the Old Testament. Again, the sin of Balaam is Balaam gets the Israelites to cohabit and have relationships with foreign women, the Moabites, and so on and so forth. And it was something that they were forbidden from doing. That is often connected, broadly speaking, with false teaching, because when you do that, when you marry outside the family of God, you either are exposed to or to make your marriage work or whatever, you bring in the religion, another religion from the outside. So the two broad things are rebellion and then this connection with false teaching. It's one of the reasons why you get false teaching elsewhere talked about in terms of, for lack of a better way of putting it, like mixed marriages and things like this in both testaments. I think more particularly, though, I think there is something to taking both those ideas, the rebellion and then the bad theology, the false teaching. And that those two things are attachable to the sexual transgression of the Watchers. I think it's peripheral, but I think that they could be thinking that as well, because this one event basically did these two things over here, if you can follow the reasoning there. So I think that may be lurking in the back of their minds specifically. But if you go back to the actual passage in the Old Testament, you don't have anything specifically in that passage, the Balaam incident, that links back into Genesis 6. You could get there if you focus on the Moabites, the region, and then go to Deuteronomy 2 and 3, because the Amim were the giants in this region, again, that are also called Rephaim, that come from the Anakim, the Nephilim. I mean, you can get there, but it feels a little forced, to go that route, even though you could. So I tend to view it more, again, more of a theme, sort of a conceptual matrix of ideas there, that Balaam, they belong in the same bucket. They just may not be linked together specifically. Go ahead.
I just want to clarify, like the Watchers and the Watchers from Genesis 6, the sons of God, the gods of the nations, they are like different groups.
They're different groups. Yeah.
Like sons of God, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the paranormal activity, like the demonic activity that we have right now. So they're not the Watchers, because they were in prison like prior to the flood or during the flood.
It depends which group you're talking about.
Like,
so I'll summarize the question this way. The question was about, okay, demonic activity that we might see now, or again referenced in the Gospels, and the sons of God and the Watchers. I mean, what's up with that? Who is this, one group or many? You have different groups because you have different rebellions. Okay, we have Genesis 3, you got one entity, you have a divine rebellion, the figure we know as Satan, and so on and so forth. Genesis 6, you got a bunch. Okay, we're never, Old Testament doesn't give us a number. Other texts, throw numbers around. But you have a divine rebellion there, which is punished by, we're sending you to the abyss. Okay. Then you have the third rebellion, which we haven't really talked about today, but I spent a lot of time talking about in the book, and that is what happens at Babel. Okay, where God punishes the nations, he assigns them to sons of God, other lesser Elohim, lesser divine beings than himself, as a punishment.
The abyss is like a place of confusion, darkness. And it's the vine, which is two vines. Jesus say he is DPHE space vine. He say he is D space vine. Then you have this world divine. It's right there, they telling you. Kill the vine, die the vine, which is two. Bi means two. Like bisexual, disexual, two sexual. Like she could be too fast. It's all of the above. And when you see it, they will be too sexual. Like they probably, I don't know if they do too much, but they claim to be too sexual, which is bi, B-I-D-I, dies too. So it's two vines, it's two stories, or two-tongued serpent. It's two tongues, it's two stories, it's side by side, which is divine.
So that's a totally different group. Now that group,
which will lead to confusion, right? Like two vines lead to abyss. Yep. It's in his word first. He showed us. He's showing us in the living vines. You feel what I'm saying? Because his word is first. So he brought a breed of breath in the man after he grew the plants from spoke the plants, animals, then he made man and subdued and said subdue the animals. So yeah, so the vine on the tree gonna tell you about how man gonna find these vines and he's learned to tangle up. Remember, I was showing you how you get a branch and it tangle with another branch. And then you could use this idea to make a basket. You don't have to go to school. I mean, you're in the school. You don't have to go to man-made school. You see, the same way they could make a basket, it's the same way you could find out to make a basket. Just moving around in nature, carrying a branch from one place to another, and it hooks onto something, or you drag more leaves or debris with it. You can make a broom. You got a broom. You feel what I'm saying? Yeah. Before you even made a rake. He already done said it. Mm-hmm. That's people looking at name brands. Name brand rake. They don't want the branch rake. They rather have a name brand rake. But you put brandings on your spirit, like on your brain. But your brain to become branded. And you can only see, say they got rakes called Dyson. They're the best name brand rakes, Dysons. And you can't see other rakes unless it's Dyson. You can't even see them. Because your name is, because you're branded. It ain't got nothing to do with you think you like. It ain't got nothing to do with that. It's branding. It's name branding. So you can have cattle of people. Company name brands can have cattle of people that on the side of their head it say Nike, literally. Huh.
The cattle is when the shoes come out. They all be standing outside. Like a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on the side of their head is GameStop. Not wake up in the morning Walmart or Kmart's or you know what I'm saying? Some people have Kmart and Walmart, but I'm just showing, for example, on the side of their head is GameStop. On the side of your brain, you branded Xbox. You don't like PlayStation. Or McDonald's, you don't do Burger King. Straw brooms are not plastic brooms. Name branding. Ain't got nothing to do with what you like. Whatsoever. Why they say you paying for the brand and not the material? Because that's what it is. It's a copy of Christ. So Christ paid for all sins. So when you go into the world, you have to pay for all your sins. Literally. You pay for your sins to get educated at a college or something. You pay for your sins to take classes for stuff. You pay for your sins, your ignorance. Sin is ignorance. You pay for your ignorance in the world. And Christ, to me, the light pay for you to see the world, to go and pay for your classes. The light paved the way, like they paved the sidewalk. The light paved the way to even build a sidewalk in the first place. That's what I'm saying. Which is, he paid for everything. You can see it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you can see what he's talking about. Which is ignorance. So what's on the other side of that hill? I don't know. When we walk up there, then we'll see. Which is the light paid for us to see it, which is paying for your ignorance. So when you see someone up to no good, the light paying for your ignorance. Literally. Which is sin or sense. You sensing in the light. Sense say CNC. I sense it, right? Once I sense it, I CNC. Which is sense. You feel what I'm saying? Everyone leaving the light. Like a little. Hmm.
Don't listen.
Yeah, they're leaving the light out. You realize he do talk to me through light. Yeah. It's literal. You see that cocoon? Don't cross the street right now? He telling me. It's a cocoon. Literally. He's alive. The sun is alive. God's word is alive. Huh?
What you say, ignorance is sin.
Yeah. I've been saying it for years, Lord. Okay, I guess you allow yourself to hear me. You allow yourself to hear me. Okay. I'm saying it all the time because I can see it. I'm not sure to you. I'm the one that sees it. It's right there. People don't get what I'm saying. When you laugh, I can't help it because when you see it, you're gonna be like, why ain't see it before? You're gonna be like, huh? I know. You really realize what ignorance really is. You realize what fear is. You realize what it really is. All that other stuff, the fear and the ignorance, that's the results. That's the results of true ignorance. You feel what I'm saying? People's addiction is the results of that dictionary. Before you even found cigarettes or stop signs, people are addicted to stopping at stop signs. Also, they're addicted to stoplights. They're addicted to staying on the side of the yellow line. I ain't saying break the driving rules at all. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you can feel it. Like you can feel it when you're about to swerve over, right? You're like, oh, like okay, you can feel it. Walk by spirit, not by sight. You can feel it. You always felt it. We acting like the literal act that we acting. Like this not fair. I just paid my rent or I've been paying this much for this amount of time and now they don't went up. And you can feel this something, this feeling, which is it. That's it. You kind of get what I'm saying? Your whole life. You ain't stupid. That strange and weird feeling that we feeling throughout our life when we see something and we just like, nah, we just shake it off. That's it. And it's sometimes it can be eerie, like real eerie, kind of like a real eerie feeling when you know you see something or feel something. Then nah, my mama don't see it, so I guess it's okay. Or like, my mama say something, maybe she see it, right? So you kind of keep going on throughout your life. And I'm telling you, that's it. You ain't stupid. You ain't stupid when you like, why food don't taste the way it used to taste, and you don't cook food as long as you used to. You ain't stupid. You can feel it. You feel what I'm saying? There ain't no words for it. It is. You saying it, but it's like wrong heat. Ignorance. Well, we're ready to hear it on this box before we hear it from each other. Yeah, because they're supposed to graduate and stuff. They put the box up higher than themselves. Mhm. Pharisees, the scribes and the Pharisees. Pop culture. Reconstruction. World's Fair. Freedom of the press. Ain't none of these things good. You feel what I'm saying? And they talk about it in your face. Removal of 10 Commandments from schools and courthouses. They talk about it in your face. Which is they finna do the good and evil thing.
The only way you can find about it.
Yeah.
And that's the only place you can get it free.
The church used to. But you see it. You see what's happening. All the hymn books in the thing now. You see what's happening. You just don't, you put trust we put trust into this what we know we seeing. Like yeah, they so nice to you, right? Oh, we're to see you church today, right? Like you seeing all the Bibles disappear from them little pockets behind the chairs, all the Bibles disappeared. Ain't nothing but hymn books, and don't nobody take them. I guess, right? Yeah, you realize the change. Remember, you used to have cushion on the seats, man. It's sad. It's sad they do you like this. Remember, you used to have cushion on the seats. Remember, they used to have them fans for everybody. Everyone could get a fan. Yeah, now they only have like 2 or 3 men. That's stuff by design to me. It's on purpose. Like this how you treat. That's how they treat their servants. To us, and we don't have enough to get the fans, and we don't have enough to get the cushion, and people put their fingerprints all on the stuff, and to clean it is too much work. They talk to you like this. You realize it's uncomfortable by design, all of that stuff. Like in the courthouse, it's the same seating. You doing this all day. Like if you got a few hours, you're doing this because your side where if you got hips, I mean not hips, you got thighs like me, your thighs hurting all the time. You're sitting on your thighs. Yeah, so yeah, people without cushion back there, I bet it's rough for us. Sitting on bone. It's horrible. no talking. And then they'll sit on the other side of that little wall and be talking and laughing. And they'll talk over there to us. They're sitting over here, no talking. You want to go outside? And they'll go over there, they be just talking and laughing. You feel what I'm saying? It feels like some kind of slavery, foolishness. Yeah, and they go over there, laugh and talk.
I should go and $50.
Ain't that something? And they very well have people, you know how they sell your washing machines? People ride past people when it rains and they splatter water and mud on them, and you can get people to sell to buy more washing machines if you could have people to ride around splattering mud on people. Yeah. So they have people to come in there and cause false crisis actors, right? False acts. And then where everybody be like, we can't have that in there. We trying to get through this. This is serious, right? And everybody agree to it. Just like them people that roll past splattering mud on you so you can buy washing machines. Why popcorn $4 at the movie theater and showing you foolishness on the news to get your children in school. Like, how we get more children in school? Give them foolishness on the news. Mind screwing, all of it. Your washing machine go with your ketchup. Your washing machine go with your ketchup. The ketchup go with the trunk of your car. Trunk of your car go with your car jack, perpetual motion. The jack of your car bring you right back to your washing machine. You fixing that car, it'll bring you right back to the washing machine like that ketchup you went and bought at the grocery store. So the washing machine connected to the clothing store. Clothing store connected to the washing detergent. The washing detergent connected to the gas station. And it's all one entity. Yeah. A copy of his word. So the bees pollinating the flower, from flower to flower, assembly line, a copy of you. A copy of you scratching an itch, scratch, itch, scratch, itch, scratch. Assembly line is a copy of you. They put these things higher than themselves.
Is the one that, is the orienting point for what scholars call cosmic geography. Different episodes in the Old Testament where things happen that the language is used that a typical deity is associated with a typical place. Okay. Paul is referencing this when he refers to principalities and powers. Paul uses terms that show up in Daniel 10 for princes, the Prince of Persia, Prince of Greece, all that kind of talk, divine beings that are over the nations and manipulating them and abusing them. Paul's other vocabulary, thrones, dominions, powers, rulers, authorities, they are all terms used of geographical rulership. That is not a coincidence. Paul understands the world of the Gentile perceived through the eyes of God, that these nations are under the dominion of divine beings that he assigned to those nations.
He said, you've been signed a demon, meaning us, right? That's what he said. He said, every one of you been assigned a demon, meaning us. And that demon knows your every move, your every moment. It knows your sensitivities. That demon understands you. And once he said that, I hear you. That demon understands you. Now, how the world understand is, wait, learning all about me and this, yeah, that too. And but he understands you. Yeah. So if he understands you, he under you. He stand under you, he understands you.
But who rebelled, that's what Psalm 82 is about, and are now hostile to him. So we have spiritual warfare in the most explicit sense in all this. But they're a third group. So there's no sense that that group has been dealt with or punished or put in the abyss. So they're, for lack of a better way of putting it, they're running around. They're doing their thing. They're abusing the nations. They're abusing the people. They get the people to, do all sorts of things in self-destructive patterns. Again, it's back to Psalm 82.
That's what I was saying.
So they're gonna be judged again at the time of the end, which means they can still be active in some sense now. Now, I personally don't assign specific points of geography to them anymore, and that's because the Old Testament story, once you get post-cross, it's no longer about just this entity, Israel, and 70 nations in Genesis 10. It becomes about all the world. Okay, now needs to be won back. It's not, Jesus is not just the Messiah for Israel, he is the Messiah to the nations. Paul is the apostle to the nations, to the Gentiles. It becomes global on both sides. If you are Christ, you are Abraham's seed and heir according to the promise. This is written to Gentiles in Galatians 3. Okay, the people of God are not just Israelites. Has nothing to do with ethnicity. It has nothing to do with land boundaries. Okay, the people of God are those Jew or Gentile who align themselves with Christ, and where they are is where he is. Okay, where 2 or 3 of you are gathered, there I am in your midst. Just this whole theology that cosmic geography now is wherever Christians are, that should be considered holy ground and treated as such and taken as holy ground, to use the metaphor. Wherever the Spirit of God is not present, because the Spirit of God indwells believers. This is why believers are called collectively and individually the temple. Okay, again, the language is not accidental. This is where the glory is. Okay? Wherever it's not, wherever believers are not, that is ground under dominion of somebody else. And so that's the sense. We need to view it in a sort of a collective sense. So in that regard, that whole system created through the events of the Old Testament is still around and still active. But those guys, again, in biblical thinking and in Second Temple Jewish thinking, those are not the demons that Jesus encounters in the Gospels. That's something else. Those are specifically, we saw one passage in Enoch. The demons in the Gospel stories are the disembodied, immaterial part of the dead Nephilim, the dead.
He said disembodied of the Nephilim, which is the men of renown, which is history. So George Washington Carver, which is a painting, for example, which is a painting. I can't say he existed. He do no dishonor to his family or none of that, right? But he was always a painting to me. So does George Washington Carver painting character can live inside of me, make it peanuts, right? Like, which is a character, which is acting. Disembodied, the man with a man of God being removed, and then everyone act these characters. They not at home. They in the world. And it's like these characters done took over their flesh. Because they out on their vacation. They out in the world, like literally. Prepping, where he was saying something about those seek to save their lives will lose it. Prepping food and stuff. They mind out there prepping. They mind out there at vacations, theme parks, the movie next weekend, a new jacket, a new game. When they graduate, they mind in these places that their body is not at. which is they, it's literally they in the world, literally.
Your mind is always a place before you go.
Yeah, which is the now. But you go to school and you learn to take your place to Italy, when there was no such thing as Italy. It's pain. So now you can wander, literally, wander to go to Italy, and you can travel across the Pacific or whichever ocean. In your mind, if you ain't never, and when you see the beach, you probably start right there. And you start going across that dang on water to Italy. In your mind. And that means you ain't at home. You in the world. Yeah, literally. In a place that don't exist. It's pain. Fantasy. Storyteller. You say a sentence in a certain order, people mind and start traveling that way.
You know, like Cinderella, when they tell you the story of Cinderella, every girl want to be Cinderella.
Mm-hmm.
Or princess.
Yeah. Your mind will travel that way. Pineapple daiquiris. Your mind will travel that way if you have knowledge of it. Your mind will start traveling to pineapple daiquiris. You feel what I'm saying? There's not one there, there's not one pineapple there. It ain't nothing there for it. And you out there at the stove buying the stuff before your body even get there, which is the sandwich. Before your body get there, you already got the sandwich. It's on purpose. It's by design. For it to work, you need to not be at home. When you fantasize about Disney World and never go a day in your life, we're just not at home. They're not at home. They're in the world. They're going to Hollywood one day. Someone went and lived in the hills, which is Hollywood. And they mind. And probably went there and lived there for real. If you can call it that. It's your eyesight, no matter where you go. When you see how God on everything. Because it's your eyesight. It ain't New York. It's your eyesight if you go there. The only place you been is in your eyesight. You see how movies and video games copy his word. Well, how they got the cut in the movies. You mess with your mind. Mind screwing. Magic. You see one person's face and then they flick and you see a whole nother face. And people start thinking and talking this way. When you tell the movie, you tell the story of the movie you've seen, that's how you tell it. So you'll start talking. People will start talking like movies, like how we watch them. They tell 3 months, they took 3 years to do in the movie. They did 3 years from 99 to 2001. And then we go home, we tell it in 5 minutes. We tell 3 years in 5 to 15 minutes or less or more. And we talk like TVs. We tell whole life stories in 5 minutes. You feel what I'm saying? They say 1969, and then they'll say present day 2021. So you went through decades, many decades, supposedly, in a few minutes. It's mind screwing. I love it. So you go home and tell the story from 1969 to 2021 in a few minutes. Even lesser than the movie. So they might well sit there and watch the whole movie if you tell them the whole movie from point A to point Z. It's gonna take you longer, really. So we made it shorter because it's convenient. So people don't want to hear your detailed story like how Wayne told. It's taking too long.
Shortcut.
Yeah, program it. The way you thinking is it, the program. The way one thinking is the program. 1 + 1 is what? 2. Okay, that's it. That's the program. The learn to drive program. Okay. All of it is a program, which is a series of commands. The- Series, which is demand. Remove the man of God. Through entertainment. They didn't know how their minds work. They didn't know how they function, like they in their eyesight. You're the only one thinking. Firstly, you got to be integrated to think you comprehend the same language. To even sit in the same movie theater. Then you can get the same program. When you think you comprehend it. Ain't got nothing to do with us having fun, and then it is ain't got nothing to do with you liking. Yep. Bruise our head and bruise our tail. We looking at the tail while they looking at your head. We looking at the story being told of the man claimed to be on the back of the dollar. That's a tail. And they looking at your head. We looking down for change. You look down to get your change at the rich, same thing. Some people look down to find a few pennies when they're going through the store, looking down for change, literally. When you're going through depression, you're looking down for a change. It's the same thing. Reading a book, looking down for change. Yep, keep your head down. Because you can read the scriptures in the stars. You can read in the beginning, if you locate it, and you can read in the beginning in the stars. Huh? Don't look at the sun, you'll go blind. But they have not looked at it themselves. Because they know. Ritual, the world evil, y'all. Sure. Talk all around your head, you bring the sun up to people that read scripture. It's crazy. How we see the scriptures, just read them. Yeah. They're leaving the land.
Giant clans. This is why you get Rephaim in the underworld in the Old Testament.
Giant clans, right?
To create.
The giant clans, the people that get educated, the 1 + 1ers or the English arts under one umbrella. Giant clans that can look across the land and report things on each other, the Gestapo police. And they can report things on each other, which is a giant. One plus one is 2 for miles around. So them people can look around and tell the other person the grapevine. And which is a giant. they have one entity. Point plus one is two, which is this embodiment of the entity in all people. It look like something nice for you, right? It is. It look like something, you know, education. Educating. It's like something great for you, good for food, right? It look pleasant to the eye. It look good for food. Which will make what he was saying giant clans or a giant. Where a lot of people got Nike on the side of their brain, that's a corporation. So they work for Nike in the mind. That's a giant. They call them the mega corporations or whatever. It got nothing to do with them dollars. It's you that's been branded. So they call them giant corporations. They tell me. And then they erect buildings. They erect skyscrapers. Erect. They tell you this to your face. It's mind screwing. It is mind. It is. Sex magic. It is. The sex magic.
That linkage, you know, Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 32, Job 26, you know, you see them there. And that thinking went all the way, you know, in between the testaments, where you have lots of text talking about this is what demons are. This is why demons are called at Qumran, bastard spirits. They're bastards because they're mixed. They come from this event back here. This is why the terminology is used. Telegraph this, but we're not taught this in church. We're not taught demonology in church, I guess, for a good reason. This is standard Jewish demonology. I don't really have to look too hard to find it in the text. But all that group, and again, this national stuff, this cosmic geographical stuff, those are the two groups that Jesus and the apostles have to deal with. So, you know, you could look at what goes on in the world today, and I trust missionaries. I've given divine counsel lectures to like groups of African pastors, and they can barely stay awake, you know, because it's like, yeah, we deal with this all the time. You know, this is like, no kidding, you know, and they get it because they run into it. There's a very, I won't want to call it famous, but if you're interested from a sort of a more tame Christian context, we'll pick on the Lutherans here. There's a book called I Am Not Afraid. It's by a Lutheran guy, and you can't get any more unexcited than Lutherans, okay? These aren't charismatics, okay? So it was this, guy had to write a dissertation, and his dissertation topic was like church planting in Africa. So he went to some group that his church and his denomination was helping in Africa. And when he got over there, part of their liturgy, everywhere they went, and their order of service was exorcisms. They would just go into a town and, we're going to have a church service. We're going to start a church here. And they didn't have to solicit anything. People would show up. And before they did anything, it's like, okay, we need to claim this as holy ground because of the principalities and powers, and they do whatever their service, and people would go crazy. It would sort of bring out the possession. Instead of bring out your dead, it's bring out your possessed, you know? And they just like went through this is what we do. And this guy was like shocked. He's like, they never taught us this in seminary. Did Luther write about this? You know, and so he wound up changing his topic to write about that, because he couldn't believe it. He'd never seen anything like it. And to the people over there, they're still Lutherans. They're still boring. Okay, they're still not charismatic, but they're like, yeah, it's just what we need to do here. So we do it. Because if we didn't do it, we wouldn't get anywhere. Okay. Get her done. So, I trust people who have no reason to lie to me, and they have no reason to just lie in general. Missionaries from all over the world, we went into that town, and there was just this place that we were told, this is owned, this is under dominion. And you get a confrontation there, something goes on there. I mean, there's something that is going on there. So I think that stuff does happen and can happen. It's a reflection of, again, the whole cosmic geographical thing. So it's either that, or it's, again, some low level, demonic entity. Because again, if you know the terminology, sons of God, the geographical dominion guys are they're higher on the pecking order in both biblical and standard Jewish demonology. Go ahead.
So what you're talking about, like Fern and Audrey.
They run into it occasionally. They don't run into a whole lot of that.
I actually have a different question.
Yeah. Well, there was a question over here.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. We've been going through Corinthians, and this kind of goes back to something you just mentioned a minute ago. Paul's new creation language in 2 Corinthians 5. Generally speaking, I've always heard it taught and kind of understood it as, well, it's when we become believers, we need to live our lives according to the gospel. We need to live our lives like Christ lived our lives, and Christ lived his life. And you just get this kind of giant overview of, this is what you're supposed to be as a new creation. You need to live your life correctly. But going through like 1 Corinthians 15, resurrection chapter, it seems Paul has like a much more focused idea, I think, behind the new creation language. And as we kind of talked about, like,
are you suggesting it has something to do with the rolling back of the nations?
Well, yeah,
and the gods.
We talked about like the three rebellions.
Sounds suspiciously biblical.
We have the sacrifice of Christ, of course, allowing us communion with God again, kind of reversing the fall, if you will. We have the spreading of the gospel, which is reversing Deuteronomy 32. The Spirit indwelling believer and the new creation language, is that a reversal of Genesis 6?
I think it's a reversal of all of it. Okay, when I think about the Messiah, just in academic terms, the Messiah was about undoing all of it. The cross is about a solution for the problem of death. That was the result of what happens in Genesis 3. Estrangement from God. We are separated, estranged from the source of life. You cannot have eternal life unless you're in the presence of God. Okay, so it's about a solution for that. It's about a solution for the general proliferation of depravity in the world, which, again, Second Temple Jews are going to lay squarely at the feet of the whole Genesis 6 thing. It's also about reversing what happened at Babel, taking the nations back, making the Gentiles part of the people of God again. All of it. The Messiah is critical to all of that. And we just spent a week with Fern and Audrey at the end of September. And what they wanted this year, they wanted to spend, I say a week, it's 3 days, it's always 3 days. They wanted to spend 3 days on the theme of the death of the gods, or the defeat of the gods. And so we went through a couple Old Testament passages, but I think that the best thing for them, and we started in 1 Corinthians 15, is when Paul talks about the resurrection. Oh, for sure, he talks about Jesus is the first fruits of the resurrection, and you're united to Christ, you're in Christ, all these familiar Pauline terms to identify us with the one who rose from the dead. And Paul's teaching, well, then you're going to rise from the dead too. Okay, that's the way we hear it in church. Nothing wrong with it. It's true. But what we miss is that Paul often connects resurrection language with the defeat of the principalities and the powers and the rulers and the authorities. He does it in half a dozen places. So the question is, well, it's easy to see why Paul, when he's thinking about resurrection, thinks about his own resurrection and living forever with the Lord. That's easy. Why does he keep thinking about, the principalities and the powers and the nations? Okay, that's why, because they need to be brought back into the fold. The resurrection was the key event to take the effect of what the Messiah did and apply it to the cosmic geographical Gentile problem. And the Gentile problem is not just that they're not Jews. The Gentile problem is that they are under dominion. And that was God's own decision all the way back into Babel. And so the message is really clear. You know, Jesus is saying, I am not here. What I did, what I'm doing, what I did, it's not just about the Jew. It's not just about, you know, fulfilling covenants given to the Jews. It is about reversing this whole set of circumstances. It's about everything. And so in Paul's mind, since this was why he was called to go to the Gentiles, this is in his head the whole time. This is the authority, because now he can go to a Gentile and he can say, look, dude, I know that Yahweh, the God of Israel, put your whole, you know, all you guys under dominion because of what happened at Babel. Burnett's paper goes into Plato, into Philo. The secular Greco-Roman world had the same view, that the nations had been assigned their gods. Okay, they had the same view. So the Gentiles know what he's talking about. It's just that Paul says that the one behind this is the God of Israel, and it was a punishment. It's not a good thing. You were punished by this. So you think that to be right with those gods, you have to stay put and worship them and believe them. Well, I'm here to tell you that's just garbage. I'm here to tell you that Jesus of Nazareth was this God, the Most High, in flesh, incarnate, died on the cross, rose again, and you don't have to obey these other powers. In fact, it's not a bad thing if you disobey them. It's what the real God wants you to do. He wants you to reject them. He wants you back in the fold. That's why he writes to the Galatians, having once tasted the heavenly gift, are you going back to be enslaved? It's like, this is insane. People are insane. Again, because he's thinking of it in these terms. Why do you want to be shackled to beings that are already defeated? As church grows, it's proof that their rule is invalidated. It becomes the legal basis for saying, you don't belong here anymore. You have no authority. And if you've listened to the Fern and Audrey podcast, that's important language to them because of who they minister to. They'll be in sessions and get into that sort of language, and people just, especially the ones who have some occult background, they just get that instantly, and it matters to them. But that isn't the only thing they see, but they get a lot of that sort of thing going on. Go ahead.
So of the three fallen groups, is there, like, I'm a fireman, so I work in the incident command system, expand and control. Are they working for one incident commander, and is that Lucifer? Are they independent? Are they just all doing their own thing?
I'm gonna again. There's no verse that actually spells this out, but okay. The question is, what's the pecking order? What's the hierarchy? Who do all the bad guys work for one bad guy? You know, for Satan. I actually don't think that they all work for Satan. I think they all have a common enemy, and the common agenda is control. I think Satan is called what he's called, you know, the God of this world, because he owns humanity in a theological sense, and if we're going to use legal vocabulary. Why? Because all humans die. He essentially owns their soul, and the resurrection is the solution to that. You have to have the resurrection is important. You have to have a death before it, or else you don't have a resurrection. And once you have one, you can't go back to being dead. So that is the solution for that ownership problem, and he's the one that reaps that benefit, as it were, or reaps that result of his own rebellion and human failure. So there's that, but there's no hint in any scripture, any text that I know of, that, for instance, Satan was the one who convinced the sons of God in Genesis 6 to go do that. There's nothing like that. Satan was the one who put the bug in God's ear to assign the other nations to other sons of God, knowing that they would rebel. There's nothing like that. So there's definitely pecking order language. Sons of God is a term that was used of an elite part of an administration, because you tended to give the best jobs to your relatives. They're the ones you sort of have on a tighter leash. You're related to them. In theory, you can trust them more, that sort of thing. This rulership language is borrowed from the ancient, Near Eastern world to telegraph to
Call it
us
what?
that there is,
Rulership language? Yeah, he just said it.
there's definitely pecking order language. Sons of God is a term that was used of an elite part of an administration, because you tended to give the best jobs to your relatives. They're the ones you sort of have on a tighter leash. You're related to them. In theory, you can trust them more, that sort of thing. This rulership language is borrowed from the ancient, Near Eastern world to telegraph to us that there's a hierarchical system. Angel, Malach, Angelos, it's just a messenger. That's what they do. They don't govern territory. They take messages. It's a job description. So there is a pecking order in terms of tasks, very task oriented, but there's nothing that says they all work for one guy. I think he gets primacy of place as well, not just because of the death, the mortality problem, and the one who ruined God's plan initially. But since he was the first rebel, he has sort of street cred among all the other rebels. And I think what he says to Jesus in the temptation was sincere. In other words, he knows who Jesus is. It's very evident. He knows why he's here in terms of what the end game is. Well, the Son of God's here. He wouldn't be here unless God had that silly kingdom of God thing on his brain again, this restoring the kingdom idea. So we know, he's the son of David. We know what God's angling for here. He wants control of the earth again. So he says to Jesus, I can give you that. I can give you the nations of the world. Okay, and I read that as saying that I believe that the devil believed he could pull that off. He can say, look, he can say to all the other guys, look, we'll surrender our sovereignty to the Son of the Most High if he bows down and worships me. Okay, so I think the offer was sincere in that respect. And Jesus is like, well, I know something you don't. I know that really doesn't solve the problem, A, because I have to die and rise again. And I'm not spilling the beans here either. And I don't need what you're offering. I have another way of getting it. So, eat dust, just get out of here. So I tend to think, again, they're free will beings as well. They have common enemy. They want control, but that doesn't mean that they all salute, one entity. I think there's competition.
We call that independent action.
Yes.
Good.
Go ahead,
I
Lori.
just want to go back to what you just read before when you were talking about Paul was assigned to the Gentiles.
Right with that.
I just had the baby Christian. When you learn about Paul, you learn about he is the Jewish academic, right? And you think, well, why isn't he assigned to the Jews? They're
Right.
He's killing Jews. He can teach those Pharisees. What's going on? But that's what's amazing when you learn about all this stuff. The Genesis 6. It's like, that's why. It's because he knew his Bible.
He's the perfect choice.
Exactly.
He not only knows his Bible really well, but he knows lots of other texts really well. Because he quotes more external texts more often than anyone else in the New Testament. So,
Can you explain his training, just brief little?
well, he sat at the feet. He sat at the feet of Gamaliel. That's in some biographical language Paul uses. So, Gamaliel was a well-known, highly respected teacher in rabbinic Judaism. He would have been a recognized authority within the whole community, and so Paul was his student. And based upon what you read in Acts, and again some of the stuff he says in Philippians, but Paul was either a member of the Sanhedrin or sort of a member in waiting. Some people argue about that based upon what may have been Paul's age. Was he married or not? And, all that sort of stuff. But he certainly had high stature. He was also extremely well read. He uses Septuagint, he uses Targum at some time, he quotes Hebrew, he quotes Greek poets, he quotes Second Temple Jewish literature, he quotes classical religious texts. It's very evident that he had for his day, he had a premier education, and a member of the Pharisee party, as he says in Philippians. So, there's plenty of Pharisees to go around who knew their Old Testament really well, but there were only a handful that were steeped in Hellenistic material. So Paul becomes, in hindsight, a really good choice. We'll take one more, and we should get going. I'm on a leash today. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You mentioned the alignment of September 11th, 3 BC, and so I've heard you sidestep this question before.
I'll sidestep it again.
Is there another alignment in the future, near future?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. The question is, in regard to the September 11th, 3 BC birth, is there going to be an alignment of the same circumstances in the future? The short answer is yes. In the portent, I do not give the date for that, nor will I. There's a lot of talk on the internet about this, that when anybody know when the world is supposed to end again next? It's like, no, it's in September in 27. I think it's September 23rd or something like that, 2017. Oh, I get them an email. So something like that. And part of the problem is there are people who are, there's some methodological flaws to this. Number one, there isn't a single verse in the New Testament or in the Bible period that tells us we should look for the same set of astronomical circumstances that were present at the birth of the Messiah and will be present at his second coming. There is zero, not a single verse. We're also never told, B, what the sign of the Son of Man is. Okay, because there's astronomical language associated with the second coming. And the one reference point that we're given is the sign of the Son of Man. Okay, that's nice. Is that the set of birth circumstances? Is that the set of circumstances at the crucifixion? Is that the set of circumstances at the resurrection? Or does it mean something totally different? Does it just mean the Lord, when he comes back, hey, there he is, the Son of Man? Has nothing to do with astronomy. The answer is, it could be any of that or none of it. We just aren't told. We are told that no man knows the day or hour, so I would suggest that since you can track days and hours with astronomy, that's probably not the thing that we should be looking at with any certainty as far as the second coming of Christ. Now, you'll have people endlessly speculate about this on the end, and of course, I mean, who knows why? I could get real nasty and speculate why. Some people are just desperate for a following, I guess. But they'll. How many of you have read The Portent? I'm not going to give another spoiler here. Okay. I have a Mantello. Okay, Mantello is real. He's just not a mute Pakistani kid. He's somebody else. And I get emails from him regularly about, oh, look at this, look at that. He sends me all these charts and it's full of astronomy talk and most of it goes over my head, which is why I need him. But he'll say, here they go again. They're plotting this thing out and they're assuming that the only signs that matter are the ones in Revelation 12. Or they're assuming a specific set of signs that were present on September 11, 3 BC, not realizing that there are things present at that date that aren't present at this one, because the sky is the sky and always will be the sky. So how many parameters should we put in here? How many should we consider? and give me the whole grocery list of these things. Now I know, because he doesn't use BCC, I know who else gets that information. And there are people who are getting that information that should be just shutting up, but instead will take parts that they want to take and put it on their website and put it into videos and put it into books so they can gain a following. I have not posted about that. I'm just waiting for the right time to do that. Okay. So oh no, right after the failure. Right after the failure. Yes, I know where the information goes. But again, I just think it's wrong, to be a date setter. And so I will not put what Mantello thinks. Mantello would say it like this. Well, if we're supposed to look at this, here's what we'd look for. Okay, and yes, there are dates like that. You can plot them out. You can do all sorts of stuff with them. So if I were of this mindset, here's what I would be putting out there. So, I'm just not going to do that. I think it's irresponsible. People will run with it. Even people know me by now, I'm not going to do that. But that's not going to stop somebody else from doing it.
Thank you.
In the back, last one.
Will this new book be an audible version and a digital version?
The Enoch book will be on Kindle. I don't know about the audio. I'd have to ask Tom if he has a plan there. I don't know that they've ever done an audio book, but he might consider it. And it's the same with the novels are not in audio. Unseen Realm is. That was a publisher decision. I've actually never listened to it. So they hired some guy who does that. I don't even know what it sounds like. Okay. Is he British?
No,
Is he British? Oh, darn. Right. Yeah. I'd love to sound British. Yeah. So I don't know, but I'll ask him. I'll ask him if there's any. The only one I know about is Kindle, because that's in the contract, but I don't know what else.
By the way, it's 15 hours long.
It is? Okay. 15. Yeah, it took a lot longer. 1 hour for every year it took to produce the thing. Yeah. And for my own story, I sort of had my watershed event. If you've read Unseen Realm, I relate this in the very beginning of the book, where I was a graduate student, doctoral student at the University of Wisconsin. How many of you are like Gons that you, before today, or even, we'll give a little history. How many of you have heard of me before today, or maybe before, let's just see today. Okay, that's pretty much everybody. Okay, how about the last couple months? Okay, at least a year. So there's your research for you. Anything you want to add to it? Because I'm always curious. this is I think the 10th one of these that I've done. So there's always a mixed crowd. This is probably the biggest concentration of people who've heard me in all that I've done. And so we might, it just depends. We might shift gears a little bit in terms of what I usually do, but since I always have sort of like a 50-50 mix, I end up going through a good bit of the book content, at least as much as you can do in a couple hours, the book Unseen Realm. And so the plan is typically, and if you saw the schedule for this one, it's, this is why it is the way it is, at least up until this point. Trying to go through the book, hit the high points in a few hours, and then leave at least an hour and a half for Q&A. That's kind of been the norm. We might be able to change a little bit of that up and have more Q&A, but we'll play it by ear. So the other thing that I like to ask, just out of curiosity, and since Gans brought it up, how many of you have read the novels as opposed to Facade? Okay, so at least one of them. All right, so that's maybe half, creeping up a third of half. Okay, that's a good representation too. My usual intro, therefore, I could just throw out the door. I usually warn people right about now. Okay, what I'm going to say, will perhaps trouble you, rattle your cage, yada yada yada. But I'm one of the good guys. We use our powers for good here, and not powers for evil. One of the white hats in Middle Earth, if you've heard Gans's thing. I got on this Middle Earth thing on his, which I find really useful, actually. But those of you, since we have a lot of exposure here, you're already gonna know that a good bit of what we say here is not going to be the kind of thing you hear in church. And I view that, again, as a good thing, because I crossed the Rubicon years ago of no longer deciding. I actually remember like having this thought pop into my head. Mike, because I had taught biblical studies in the undergrad level for a number of years, but I remember having the distinct thought, you need to stop protecting people from their Bible. And I said, yep, that's what we're no longer going to do that. And that hurts, depending on what group of people are sitting in front of me. There's a price to be paid for that, but it's a good price, at least in my experience. But for a number of you, you've already sort of, either by experience or you kind of already know that. So what I want to do here is I'm going to go through some Old Testament stuff, and I'm going to go through quickly because we might be able to compress time or again switch gears. Don't freak out if you can't keep up with me in terms of slides. I will give you the slides. Email me, okay? Put something in the subject line, because I get lots of email. Put something in the subject line like, I heard you in San Juan Capistrano, or I was there, or I was a witness. Okay, I will send you the slides, so don't worry about that. It's getting recorded, you'll have the audio, you should have everything you need. What you should be doing is, as you pay attention, some of you probably already came with questions, write them down. We will make an effort to get through all the questions to the best of our ability as we go through. So with that said, this is what I typically try to hit in the first session. Divine Council, Cosmic Mountain, Cosmic Rebellions, Cosmic Geography, they sort of go together. And again, if you're a reader of Unseen Realm, you already have a good feel for what this is. Cosmic, another word for supernatural, again, the other world, not the world of men. Cosmic Mountain, again, we'll just go through real quickly when we get there. And the rebellions, I'm going to present this a little bit differently than I have up to this point. But Divine Council, you already, again, are basically familiar with it. But in case we have some who aren't, or who have wondered about it, I had Psalm 82 there as a reference point. Psalm 82:1 again is the key verse, and I'm not going to rehearse sort of my epiphany on this again. If you've heard me on podcast, the radio, or read the book, you know that. But the thing to take away from this verse in Hebrew is that you have the word Elohim occur twice in the same verse, and it actually matters. A number of English translations will obscure this. So in the course of what I'm going to go through, I want you to start thinking about, okay, how do we look at our Bible? What is the supernatural worldview? You're going to have counsel ideas. That is God is not alone in the animate spiritual world. Now, as Christians, we're used to hearing that. Oh yeah, there's angels and demons out there and Satan. Yeah, okay, there is, but there's a whole lot more going on than that. And there's some terminology that is used that describe, again, if you can sort of speak the language, if you can look at what a verse says again and have the Israelite in your head, the ancient Near Eastern background in your head, it will telegraph certain ideas to you. So we're going to talk about that. But God isn't alone. He works in a bureaucracy. And we'll talk about, well, why does God need to do that? Short answer is he doesn't need that. It's just the way he does things. But you need to be thinking about what goes on in the spirit world, how an Israelite would look at it, not how someone who is a reformed person, John Calvin, or a modern evangelical.
I gotta say something.
And by virtue of that, there's going to be talk in the Bible about where God lives. And where God lives is where his counsel is, because that's where he conducts business. And that is going to sort of bleed into what God intended with Eden. And that, of course, is going to morph into the problem of rebellion, both human and divine. So just that short list of things is what we're going to talk about. But it all sort of starts here. Because this is a passage that lots of people read the Psalms. They've read this Psalm maybe 50 times, but you never kind of see what's going on because of English translations. So we have God has taken his place in the divine council. I've clicked on God here. I don't know if you can really see the shadow. Over on the right, you can see this column. Again, this is the word Elohim. Very common word for God, no big deal. This is an easy verse to translate. Elohim, Nitzah, Ba'ad, God takes his stand or takes his place in the divine council. We know it's singular because this word here is a singular participle. Okay, grammar is actually important. I know most of you hate it or hated it, so I'm sorry for the grammar spasm, but it actually comes in handy with respect to biblical languages. We know the Elohim here is one person because of the verb, subject verb agreement. You say, well, why is this controversial? Well, it's because of the next occurrence of Elohim. In the midst of the Elohim, the Karav Elohim, Mishpat. In the midst of the Elohim, he, the first one, passes judgment or holds judgment. So we have God doing something that sounds like really important in the midst of other gods. Now, we have been trained as evangelicals reflexively when we see the words GODS and the letters GODS in our Bible. When the English translation doesn't put it in scare quotes, when it just leaves it alone, we're trained to think, oh, idols, those are idols. And if you actually sort of drill down into some Bible study, you get into some sources like commentaries, oftentimes you will be told things like, oh, the gods, they're really just people. They're really just, like human rulers, human elders, that kind of thing. Like if I had to, well, I might as well just stick it up here since I'm in the software. If we put the NASB here, God takes his stand in his own congregation. He judges in the midst of the rulers. Well, thank you. Nothing to look at here, citizen, move along. English translations tend to obscure things. But I hear it. Look. I'm an academic. I know the people who produce these translations. They're not like evil, sinister beings. Okay, everybody's human, but the goal is never, I'm going to go through my portion of the translation and obscure everything that I don't like. I mean, that's never the goal. With translators, they're good people, but yet there are passages where they get nervous because they think what they put will make you nervous. Okay, or their publisher nervous, or the editorial committee that they hand off their work to nervous. Okay, this just happens. It is what it is. But nevertheless, you don't you don't get to look at sort of the inside baseball, of what goes into this sort of thing. And this does happen. You will get translations that will obscure some fairly important things for you. And this is sort of a, just a lockdown, no-brainer kind of test case for that. If you keep reading through the passage, God is angry with the gods for being corrupt. Let's just turn this off for a second. How long are you going to essentially be wicked, judge unjustly, so on and so forth? You really ruined things. Verse 6, I said, you are gods. So let's turn our interlinear back on. Here it is again. All of you guys, you're Elohim. Sons, guess what? Again, this you might want to write down. I'm going to make a few profound statements during the course of the day. This is probably the first one. Sons is plural.
Literally.
Okay. That means there's more than one. Should I slow down? Okay. Sons is plural. So you can't cheat here. It's sons of the Most High. Okay, well, we know who the Most High is. That's not a brain teaser, all right? Sons of the Most High, you're Elohim, all of you. Again, there are translations that do a masterful job of obscuring this kind of thing. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die. So there's a point of contrast. He's not speaking to a bunch of Jewish elders that says, hey guys, someday like men, you're going to die. Like, duh. Well, that's profound. We needed God to tell us that, like we couldn't figure that one. Again, if you're the New American Standard and you're doing this ruler thing, you're already, again, trying to skirt, some of the things that are quite evident in the text. This is the ESV. The ESV does a pretty good job here. It does questionable things in other passages, but this is pretty straightforward. By the way, if you go back to a passage like the King James will have gods. I mean, it's pretty literal translation. It doesn't mess around with it. So, what do we have going on here? Again, this was kind of the fundamental question. And when I first actually, it's embarrassing to admit it, but I first actually looked at it in Hebrew while I was in graduate school. I mean, I should have done it before that. But again, that was sort of a jarring moment. And it became kind of this thing that I became obsessed with. I have to resolve this riddle here. And so, I'd been to a couple of years of seminary, strong Bible background in the evangelical tradition. So I went to the sources that I knew about. And I was really dissatisfied because so many of them cheat. So many of them would say things like, well, these are just the Jewish rulers. Well, that was sort of, okay, I guess I'll put that on the table. That's a possibility, even though lots of other people I'm reading who were not evangelical were like, this is a no-brainer. These are the gods, the assemblies of the councils. Everybody has one of these. Everybody has this conception of an active, animate, spiritual world that involved other gods. But then the critics would use that to argue that, the Israelites were polytheistic at the beginning, just like everybody else. And then all of a sudden they figured monotheism out. And that I came to realize pretty quickly was based on a lot of circular reasoning. And it actually became a critique of that, actually became my dissertation, which was really interesting. I was at an ultra liberal school, Wisconsin. I had a Jewish advisor who bought all of it. And I was the little evangelical twerp, trying to get through the graduate program. And I had to pick this really, this thing where I'm saying, I don't buy what any of you people are saying, because this is just ridiculous. But to his credit, he let me do it. And, I have some great stories about him and me, through the graduate program, but I have to give credit where credit's due. But I was quite dissatisfied with both options. And the rulers thing, okay, I guess that's kind of on the table. I felt that way until I hit Psalm 89. So, boy, Mike, you were busy that day. You read like 7 Psalms, Okay. Psalm 89 just destroys it. Let the heavens praise your wonders, O Lord, your faithfulness in the assembly of the holy ones. There's that assembly thing again. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings, and this is B'nai Elim, let's show this here. Again, B'nai is sons, again, back to my profound statement, sons is plural. Elohim is a plural for El, just like Elohim is a plural for Allah. Okay, two different words for deity in the Hebrew language. So who among the heavenly beings, the sons of God, is like the Lord, of God greatly to be feared in the council of the holy ones? Now, second profound statement. The last time I looked in my Bible, the skies were not filled with a bunch of Jewish guys ruling the nations. Okay, the council is not a bunch of people. I've also never seen an idol floating around up there either. And frankly, well, that's just the spirit world, Mike. This is just spiritual rulership. Well, that's great, because now you have Yahweh, the God of Israel, ruling everything along with idols. It just doesn't make any sense. But these are the reflex answers, the reflex positions that you'll run into all the time in published sources by real scholars who are good people. But you know, why? You know, and that's what was going through my head. Why are we doing this? You know, why are we fudging here when it just seems that, you know, it seems really obvious that the text is not hard here. We have God and we have plural Elohim, divine plurality, as I like to say. God is angry with them, and you know, he's punishing them. They're going to die at some point. Okay, we're not really told when. So what do we do with that? And I'll admit, it sounded like polytheism to my ear. Psalm 89 didn't let me have the Jewish ruler thing. It didn't let me have idols. Then I got to 1 Kings 22. Eventually, as I'm reading, I mean, I had to discover all these things myself. I didn't have anybody write the unseen realm that I could just go read. But this was all like just walking in the dark, but I couldn't let it go. So I came across 1 Kings 22, and again, just to, you know, the quick version of that, Ahab, wicked Ahab, wants to go conquer a city. So he tries to convince the king of the south, Jehoshaphat, hey, come with me up to Ramoth Gilead. We're going to conquer this place. Everything will be great. So he and Jehoshaphat have a meeting. And Ahab, of course, rolls out the prophets, you know, his prophets of Baal. They all say the same thing. They sing the same song. You know, oh, Ahab, you're great. You know, go up to Ramoth Gilead. You're going to, you know, kick their butts up there. You're wonderful. And Jehoshaphat turns to him and says, hey, don't we have any prophets of Yahweh around here? Like, I don't trust these guys. And Ahab actually says, oh, yeah, there's one of them, but I hate that guy. This is this wonderful line. I hate him because he never tells me what I want to hear. Well, okay, that kind of tells you everything you need to know. So they roll out Micaiah, and at first Micaiah is kind of poking fun at him. And then he finally says in verse 19, he says, I saw the Lord. We should just turn to it. It's a neat passage. 1 Kings 22. I saw the Lord, and you know, around him on his right hand, on his left, he has company. Therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, all the hosts of heaven standing beside him on his right and on his left. The Lord said, who will entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And God is not talking to a bunch of Jewish guys. Okay. One said one thing, and the other said another. Then a spirit, oh, here we find out who they are. They're spirit beings. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I'll entice him. The Lord said to him, by what means? He said, I will go out. I'll be a lying spirit in the mouth of all of his prophets. And God more or less says, yeah, that'll work. I mean, you know, if a spirit would have come forward with a dumb idea, I mean, you know, God would have said, look, just, you know, go sit down, you know, just try tomorrow. The next meeting, I might call on you. Okay. I mean, God isn't fishing for information. Okay. He already knows, you know, what the options are. God knows all things real and possible. But he wants to hear from his council. Okay, what do you guys think? I'm going to let you participate. If I hear a good idea, yeah, let's go with that. That'll work. I know it'll work because I'm God. Okay, I also know if it's not going to work. I also know if it's stupid, and I'll tell you that too. So here we have a divine council meeting. You actually get a glimpse into one where God allows his intelligent beings who are loyal to him, he allows them to participate with him in carrying out something he wants done. It is time for Ahab to die. Now, how do we want to get that done? I'll let you guys choose the method, choose the means. And they do. Now there are other meanings like this in Scripture. You get one in Daniel 4. Okay, the watchers, when a watcher, that is a holy one, comes down and he speaks to Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar's had this dream. It's the dream about Nebuchadnezzar going insane for a while. And the passage actually says, the angelic being, the watcher, says to Daniel, "This is by decree of the watchers," plural. And then a few verses later, it says, "This is by decree of the Most High." So they're working together. Okay, God didn't take a day off and said, "You handle the cosmos for a while, I'm taking a vacation." Okay, it's not that picture at all. But God allows participation. Daniel 7, the 4 beasts are going to be judged. We know that they're world empires. We know the story of the book of Daniel, all this stuff. But what does the passage say? It says that thrones were set up and the court, the council, sat to render judgment on the beasts. Okay, you have this stuff sprinkled throughout Scripture. You even get some of these that are kind of neat in the New Testament as well. So as I'm going through this, it's like, okay, God works. He has an administration. He has a bureaucracy. What's the problem? Well, of course, we know what the problem is, and we'll come back to that. The problem is questions like this. Well, what about none decides? What about the polytheism question? And again, I'm just going to summarize things to move through it quickly. I think what we can get from this is actually kind of profound. Okay, we run into these passages: God of gods, God is above all gods, God is the best God, and all this language in Scripture. I would submit to you that when the Bible says that Yahweh of Israel is the God of gods, the text means exactly what it says. Exactly what it says. That there are other Elohim, but none of them are Yahweh. But the reason we get creeped out is when we see the letters G, O, and D on a piece of paper, on a text, on a screen, whatever. Our brain, because of the way we're taught, we're Western. Okay, we're part of the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Western tradition. We have, again, our own sort of subcultures within Christianity. Because of the way we're taught, our brain immediately, when it sees G, O, and D, our brain assigns a specific set of attributes that are unique to that term, to those 3 letters. So when we see God, we think omniscience, omnipotence, sovereignty, all these things.
You know how roads crawl on the ceiling, no spider or a caterpillar to me, he's showing me how life that he created can see how you read left to right. It can also see when it's upside down, you're reading left to right. So it can see you, even though you're upside down to it. It's upside down to you, the roach on the ceiling. Because we learn to read left to right, or top to bottom. When to me, the Father saying, through the insect, you can read from the side like the insect read from the side. Or the insect read upside down, what you would call upside down. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you could, that J is a H. I mean, that Y is a J. It's also a H. The H is a J. Mojave, Mojave. So that's a Jehovah also. Because you can read it upside down, like a roach will see it. Hama. It'll see Hama. Hema. Or they'll probably see it another one. Read from the middle. Wahawa. Wahaya. You can read it from the middle of it, because the first thing you see is what you read. The first thing you see is what you read. So if you look in the middle of a word, like G-O-D, Adga, U-D, Because you seen the O first. You read O first, and then you seen the rest of the word. So you can read it from the middle of the word. Or like the pharmacy sign from up to down, like how they say P, 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 E, P, 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 P. Because PE is P too. P, 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 P. And then the next is S, 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 Z. You can read from that way too. Like the numbers, you can read 8, 3, 4, 9, 2, 1. Because it's right there. You're not lying. It's just to us, we don't get it because we read left to right one sentence at a time. You ain't gonna get it till you get it to the end of the sentence. We read left to right and from top to bottom. And it's like, I don't see that 8, 3. You know, they'll be like, well, I don't see that. Where you see that at? Like a crossword puzzle. Say that again. Yeah, they'll say they don't see it because they read left to right. They don't see that 8, 3, 4, 9, 2, 1. Even though it's right there, they're gonna say, I don't see that. What section you read? Because you educated to read left or right. You get an A for that. A child might remember the answer to these questions with them numbers. They might not even be paying attention to Psalm 86:8, Psalm 95:3. They might just remember just something like I just remember Psalms and then the numbers. Numbers at the end like 8, 3, 4, 9, 2, 1. And I can remember all this like you probably remember one at a time. When I just took the end of it and put it all in the Psalms in one folder, and I remember it that way. But when I say it, I say Psalms 86:8. I'll match it up with how I think you see. Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it really feels awful and creepy and just sinister to put an S on
I'm
it.
not getting it wrong.
The answer to this, though, is that the biblical writer, when the biblical writer wrote Elohim, he did not think of a specific set of attributes the way we do when we write G, O, and D, or when we read it. Elohim to them is not about a specific set of unique attributes, but that's because they come from a different time and place. That's because their culture is millennia removed from ours. We don't think like them because we don't have the Israelite in our head. You say, well, Mike, how do you know this? Are we just supposed to believe you because you have a PhD? And no. Okay. The way we know that is actually looking up Elohim in the Hebrew Bible. Now, I'll grant you it's boring. If you want to really know how boring it is, go up to my website, sitchiniswrong.com. The Elohim tab, I have a PDF there you can download with all the occurrences of Elohim in the Hebrew Bible. It's dull, it's boring, but there it is. Because there's a point to be made. The biblical writer.
Among, Gi, Amanga, G. You're not getting it wrong. Among, which is Emmanuel here amongst us. Among, G. A mo nigga. But I know most folks ain't gonna appreciate that one. A mo nigga. ENG say nigga to me, too. ENG say nigga. Am whole, nigga. Like, man, like how he be talking to me, right? Like, I'm whole, nigga. Like, oh yeah, most people ain't gonna appreciate it. They ain't gonna like the way you saying it. But you know you see it. King say cheat nigga. It says it. I'm not getting it wrong, but to y'all I am. It do say it. It say key nigga. It says it. Which I can see the nigga, which is the rod. It's a rod is a nigga. A copy on the battery, you know, the battery say negative and positive, positive, and negative, which is nigga. Like, you know, you stick the nigga in. A battery, a copy of you. You make energy when you come together. Positive plus negative, positive plus nega. I be saying it, y'all. Nega. Right? Like, nega. Most of them get what I'm saying. Yeah, so chi nigga is king. It says it. But I know most folks ain't gonna see the beginning. Say begin, BG nigga. BGI nigga. See, only I can see that though, right? Like begin, because there's two ends in there. Well, you don't have to use two ends, but you can since it's in the scriptures, two ends for people we know that see it that way. Begin, nigga. Like but only the son can hear him talking to him like that, you know. I'm gonna say beginning with the people. You know, like, you know, but I see it because it's right there. Yep. Fishy nigga, fishing. You fishing? You a fishy nigga. So only I can say it this way with certain people. I can't say it like this with everyone because they, you know, how they see. Because of how they see. Kissy nigga, kissing. If you seek, you shall find. If you seek it, nigga. Like, what if, Wayne? What if they talking to you like this throughout, all throughout, right? Like, what if, right? Like, because ENG, what did he say? Nigga. Literally. Oh, yeah. Hey, maybe the sister shouldn't be a nigga. You know, maybe only he got nigga. He got nigga. They count batteries off of it. Positive, negative. Even though you can't see it, they just write a symbol on there, you know. You can't really see it. So it's a positive energy and a negative energy you can't see. But it will fit inside itself. Which is the toy moves. It fits inside itself with the he and the she of each end of the battery. Like they turn their back on each other. It is, right? Like, that's how you power up stuff. Like with with negative energy, with they turn their back on each other. It's almost like you're being forced to man versus man, with man, woman with woman. And he said, God said this is a punishment for you, and you're going against what he's saying. Hey, fruitcake. We're returning fruitcake. That's how you power up stuff. Do fruitcake, like freedom of the press, right? Like, well, they like it looks like this. Well, they give you the behind the scenes, just give them what they want, right? When it's really it needs you like that to power off of you, to power off your negative energy, called hurts, to power off your depression. It's kind of like it'll give you. He says Satan is like it'll give you electricity and the abilities of it if you feed him some depression. If you feed it some depression, he'll give you some electricity. So they got greedy, right? It got greedy. They give more ideas with the electricity, more depression. Powered off your hurt. Yeah. Or the energy go out instead of in. Which is the toy movie. So how you manipulate metal to turn it back on itself? Or mental. Due to the alchemist work with metal, he's very well working with mental. When you copy the same thing with the metal, you can form a mold of mind like you form a mold metal. Probably what I don't want you to know. Your depression powers it. Probably why battery works, because of your depression. Wax, clean, Play-Doh.
Wax,
Yeah.
clay, and Play.
Yeah, all in one. True. Literally, huh? chew on food that lasts forever. You just keep chewing. They call it chewing gum. It's food that you can chew forever. And the stomach, like, what's happening? Ain't that came down here yet? What you chewing on up there? Like, why you probably get hungry when you chew gum?
Yeah.
Or not get hungry. And the stomach think that, hey, something, you about to drop something off, huh? In the sweet liquid, man, what's this? Right? Chewing so good, ain't no sweet liquid coming down. Hey, what's the sweet liquid, all that chewing you doing up there? Oh well, I act like I'm full, I guess. I act like I'm full.
Uses Elohim of half a dozen different entities. Now that alone should tell you that the biblical writer is not thinking of a specific set of unique attributes if he's using the word of 6 different things. That's really all you need, because that wouldn't make any sense. You can't have 6 unique things that are yet different. Okay, you don't, just doesn't work. So the list, I think I have the list in here somewhere. We'll get back to the denial statements in a minute. I just want you to see the list. Yeah. So who are they? Who is Elohim? Who are Elohim in the Hebrew Bible? We have Psalm 82, you have the God of Israel, that's the easy one. Gods of the council, Psalm 82:1. Gods of the nations, if you look up 1 Kings 11:33, you're going to get various gods of other nations called Elohim. Chemosh of Moab is called Elohim. Okay, Asherah is called Elohim. It's interesting. The Hebrew Bible, the biblical writers don't use the feminine term for goddess. They use Elohim actually, even when it refers to a goddess. You have the gods of the nations who are Elohim. These gods of the nations are called Shadim, which a lot of English translations have as demons in Deuteronomy 32:17. Again, there's a disconnect there because what Shadim means is different than what the demon daimonion means in the Gospels. They're actually different beings, but again, you wouldn't get that unless you looked up the terminology. But regardless, Paul quotes Deuteronomy 32:17 in 1 Corinthians 10:21 and 22 when he says, hey, you better watch out about eating meat that was sacrificed to the idols because you don't want to be in fellowship with demons. And he has a quotation of Deuteronomy 32:17 in that discussion. So Paul believed they were real. It's good enough for Paul. It ought to be good enough for us. Okay? But they're called demons, or Elohim. The Shadim are Elohim in Deuteronomy 32:17. The disembodied human dead, this is my favorite one, because this is the story of the medium at Endor. When Saul, he can't get his prayers answered. So he's kicked all the mediums out of the country, but yet he knows where to find one. And he goes to her and says, hey, I need to talk to Samuel. And she doesn't know who he is yet. She's like, oh, okay. We'll see what we can do.
One thing I can say it is,
so we're not told what she does, but she does whatever she does. And then she gets a little freaked out because she says to Saul in the room there, I see Elohim coming up out of the ground. Okay, coming up from Sheol, from the underworld. And we know that she's focused on one because Saul says, what does he look like? Saul, it's a great question. What does he look like? And she describes him, and then it kind of kicks into her head like, okay, Samuel, I bet I can figure out who you are. You're Saul. And she thinks she's in trouble. She thinks she's going to be put to death. And he's like, look, don't worry about it. Nothing's going to happen to you. What does he look like? She describes it. That's the guy. So Saul has a conversation with the deceased Samuel, the disembodied Samuel. And we know it's Samuel because of the conversation. He repeats things that Samuel said earlier. He has information that only Samuel would have. Okay, we know it's him, and basically it goes badly. Samuel's like, okay, you're all going to die, now don't bother me again. it's kind of a real quick message. Just let me alone, you're going to die, you're going to get what you deserve, so goodbye. So it doesn't work out real well. And of course, what he says happens. Samuel's a prophet. It's still a prophet. But I love this one because no Israelite in their right mind would think that their dear departed child or their dear departed uncle or aunt or mother or grandmother is on the same attribute level as the God of Israel. Well, they're all called Elohim, Mike. That means polytheism, right? No, not really. It doesn't make any sense. And the last one is the angel. I think it refers to one specific angel, but again, we can talk about that later. So here's the grouping. Here's what gets called Elohim in the Hebrew Bible, and they all have one thing in common. This is really what Elohim means. Elohim is a term you would use as a biblical writer of a being or entity, just say being, a being who by nature is disembodied and belongs in what we call the spiritual world. That is what an Elohim is. It has nothing to do with a specific set of attributes. That's why the biblical writers can use Elohim all over the place. Okay, because they believe in a spiritual world that's actually got something in it. All right. Now, again, as Christians, we're used to thinking this way, but we don't use this vocabulary. And why don't we use this vocabulary? Because we're uptight? No, it's because we're not taught. Okay, that's why we don't use the vocabulary. Nothing I just went through here is rocket science, but even for me, it was difficult because I was never taught it. Yeah, I actually had to think about it. I had to go fair. I had to do boring things. Let's look at all the 2,300 occurrences of Elohim and see what that, I mean, who wants to do that?
Like that word disembodied, it says it's like to sim body. To simulate body. To sim body. Which is demand, where you have above, which is demand. Remove the man or the mind from the body. Disembody. To somebody, which is an adult. They're not at home. Even though they walk around, they're not at home, it will be called dead. People be watching too much TV and they call dead a demon. Though if you was to write it down, it probably would come out like a humanoid shape, what they would say, in squiggly lines. Their hands would be squiggly, so you think you might see clouds. So if you were to draw it, it'd look like a person in stress, so you draw it squiggly. It'd look almost like a hairy man. To people that watch TV and stuff. Would you draw a Bigfoot? No, but this is how I feel. The person, what they going through, they're not at home and their body is stressed. Why people be sad when they come back home from Disney World, when they finally do come back home and something crazy going on, and then you're paying more attention to this stuff that what's around you. And your body said, your flesh is sad because you left it. You left it to go to Disney World. And it's kind of like you and your flesh having a battle. Why you can't take me to Disney World with you? And then the mind is like, well, why you can't get a job and find a way to get there? And it's like you can have this battle with each other, with yourself. You kind of get what I'm saying? So when you draw it, it'll be like squiggly, like a stick man, but squiggly, a squiggly man. Instead of, something we will call uniform or straight, or something we can comprehend. But it would look like what people see on TV, a creature, what they call a demon. Then you draw the regular stick man, it's like to the person viewing it, it could be Oh, that's just a stick man. So you draw up squiggly, like, oh, he in some kind of wobbly feeling or something. Yeah. Or if you do like an outline of it, like a silhouette, it'll look kind of like a bear or a Bigfoot or something. You know, if you was to draw it, it looked like something called a creature. So with people's perception, they're looking at the results of it. They're not how you can find that movie in the first place. Like ain't no one on the screen, so it ain't no creature on the screen, though it appears to be. Where is it? So you would draw it like that. You would draw it like that. That's how it looked. So whenever the creature chasing the person from under the bed, they under obedience, like they're not obedient to God, so they under the bed. So you could draw the shadowy thing, or you make a movie where you put some lights under there and make it look like eyes and move a blanket around, you know, a dark blanket or something. And you know, it's like something moving under there, right? Like, you know, that's how you would probably draw it. Because I feel that any of that stuff, if you see it, it's because they done manipulated something. They done manipulated something for you to see it. Robots. Put fur on a robot, you see Frankenstein, you see werewolf, you see like you've been seeing, like you've been thinking you've seen. Put fur, you feel like you put fur on the robot, you say that's a werewolf, you say that's Frankenstein, you say that's the Swamp Thing, and you say all these different things, it's the same robot. Some kind of manipulation. Done. So to me, it's going in for you can even make that stuff, which is the sons of God, sent the daughters of men, and went to the earth and chose wives that they choose, and created men of renown, which is the giants of the Nephilim. So the corporations, we're making robots. They do. All right. So those robots you see in the hills that Roger be talking about and stuff. Because I found some of them things when I was little, and that's why I can testify to what he showed. He says it's a foot. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was some kind of farm. I found a few of them when I was little playing around in the dirt and stuff. I used to find them not often, but I found them a few times. Um, I thought it was some kind of farm tool or some farm machinery, you know, broke off and fell off right here, and you know, from the education how you look at stuff. But then later on in my life, this guy named Roger doing mud fossils say he found one, or do he have one? Do he have a picture? I think he had one, but when he showed it, I'm like, dang, I used to find him when I was little. And he said it's a foot, a robot foot. I don't know what we would call a robot anyway. So it's the same as the days of Noah. Car's a robot. It has no life in it. A robot has no life in it. There's no life in the car. Why does it move? It's a robot. So they take the same engine, put an arm on it, and it moves around with. You say it's a robot. The same, you know. So the same as the days of Noah and the giants, like what man called giant, the results of the sons of God going into, you know, the daughters of men, taking wives that they choose. The results of it is what you call transform. Transformers, like with the sons of God. What they like. You know, a wife don't have to be a flesh. A wife could be a job. You go in labor first thing Monday morning. You go in labor. When you work, you go in labor, and you give birth to objects, services. Uncle cleaned the stadium, but they don't ever show him, which is a giant stadium. If you can call it that. Just trying to point out, So if you were to see Jesus as a giant killer, how you see giants? If you were to see giants, if you were to see one, how you see it? The light. If you were to see what man call a giant, the light. Yeah. So you keep faith in the Most High. You see these corporations doing the same thing they did then. When you look at the mountains, and people say those mountains, they say those are giants, or that's a body, right? Some people that those lands call it giant mountain, the land of the giants. And when you see it, some of them look like Transformers. Not being funny. The head of it shaped just like when you was in the Transformers, you see it. Mm-hmm. So how they know to make these Transformers look like mountains? Laying down, like a Transformer laying down on the ground, it's like a mountain of metal. And they find mountains of metal, right? So it's the same metal from the days of Noah. They show it to you like the craftsmen's on the YouTube and stuff, and how they'll find an old knife or something, and they refurnish it. The same old metal, which is probably from the flood or after, and they refurnish it. Because all you had ever needed was the recipe. You didn't have to wait till people can do quantum addition or quantum multiplication. You didn't have to wait till people can type 100 words a minute. You didn't have to wait till some tower was built and they can move in all these machines. You ain't never have to wait till none of it. If you had a recipe, it could be made right now. Like the biscuits you make in your sandwiches, or the step, like a little stool, you might make the step up on stuff. You made it yourself out of wood. You can make it right now. You always could. So to me, they had tablets, what we call tablets, way back then. So they already knew what to do. Just like they had the watch with the digital little gray stuff in it, little digital watches, and then they had just pointing at your cell phone. It's the same thing. And then they had the TV, the little portable TV, which is the screen. Radio, the speaker, and microphone. And the case just looked old. We call it old school, but it's the same thing. You have to wait till no damn polymer plastics. polymer plastics and come in chips, such. Man, y'all, you got the recipe. You can make it right now. Like that pull-up house you made. If you had other materials, you probably would have used that. You stepped out there in the backyard, Daddy had a whole bunch of sheet metal in you. Probably would have made you a sheet metal clubhouse. And you bent it, accident. You know how you, when you brush the brush through, you catch it, make a basket. And you bent it up and stuff at times, and you like, oh, I could put curves in it. Somebody like, how you do that? Look futuristic. I just mess with it. It's right there. If you had a recipe, the one to see, you could make it right now. It could be made, Flintstones, if you could say. So they probably had them there. I mean, you know, it looked like a rock, you know, a rock typewriter or something. A typewriter made of rocks, you don't know, but they had the computer, which is that rock typewriter. You know, instead of a screen, it's paper. I mean, or rocks. And they show it to you. you can write letters on rocks.
And you can write letters.
Yeah, it mail rocks to each other. But if that'll be too heavy, yeah. That'd be a great way not to keep using it. You got a library of rocks. Hey, you go heavy rocks on your shelf and just imagine, man. Why? Don't save up things on the earth. The wanting is, what do you say? Those that are wanting is no number that can be counted. Saving up things on the earth. If they made books out of rocks, you have a cabinet have to be made to hold it. Say, when you move, you have to tear all your books, your rocks. Casting stones? Man, why is it called that, casting stones, right? It sounds like you could take us with just the metal I was just talking about, right? And you find the metal in the earth from the days of Noah, and you cast it and form a screwdriver. Or just a glob of metal, you just happy you melted it or something, right? Like casting stones. So the media had to come from casting stones. Man was casting stones first. Maybe he used rocks to keep heat. You know, you can warm a rock up and you have more heat. You can cook on that rock. And found out that one rock melted. You know, who knows, right? So that rock melted, you can use it for a little knife. You know, charcoal covered little knife. When it hit the ground, it made flat with a bunch of dirt on it, right? And we found out you cut something with it. Cut fruit with it, or cut a branch with it. You can dig with it through casting a stone. Like literally, like you could cast a stone, and you could like verbally cast, which is a copy of it to me. How they learn to cast stones with verbal speech. First, you had to have a smelter, though. You, the one that received the stone, is cast, have to have a smelter to melt that stone down to even feel the insult. You have to be given a smelter, or you have to be taught to smelt metal, or mental, digest it, melted down into its purest form. Oh, I'm insulted. You gotta get what I'm saying? I can see it, y'all. I see it. Cause for one, they talk about it. They talk about smelting or casting stones. They talk about in that refinery, they casting stones in there. They tell you. They cast a stone in the hopper, man. They'll tell you. Cast material in the hopper. What's that? Like a bunch of rocks. Hey, hey. Hey, so I can drop one of these stones in there? Yeah, same one we have already. Easy. And so they do call them stones too. Easy. Like, this how you been doing. This how I've been doing. Pick up one of your own material particles. Hey, can I cast this stone into that hopper with that? Yes, go ahead. It's the same thing. It just fell on the ground. Yeah, I know. I'm slow. I'm like, I'm investigating everyone. Literally. It look like I'm slow, don't it? I'm grateful, man. I came to Earth, man. My sight was small as a pinhole size, huh? You cutting it off? Yeah, which reminds me. My sight was small as a tic tac. It was smaller than a tic tac, I think. And I came forward. My sight went to full vision. It's been full vision ever since. And I'm grateful, man, that I'm slow to everyone, but I'm sitting here with this full vision. I don't know what full vision is to everyone else. I don't know. I'm thinking some people in that little puny place, that's not funny at all. I think some people in that place and they don't know it, and they need glasses. Everyone needs glasses. I don't know why. And they probably very well back in there. And I always looked at this small to us, Wayne. But I'm not like, wait, this is normal sight to us. What you mean? Well, I don't know, but I know my sight was smaller than a tic tac. But I could still see though. It's just like that. It's a copy of it. The peephole. That peephole is a copy. But it's smaller than that. And I could see, but it's kind of like that though, right? It's like that peephole, but I could see. I don't know what I was seeing, but I could see it. I could see that toy, right? I could see that toy. But it was so far away that right now, if it was something that I placed that far away, when I got there, it was really in my face, right? But when I got there, it was in my face. But on my way there, it's kind of like if I decide to put something way down there, that's how it is. Like huh? Yeah, but I could see it though. I wasn't squinching. I could see it. And I don't know. I don't know what fun is, do I? Like I want to say it looked fun to me. I mean, to try to give you a thought of what it felt like, but I don't know what fun is. But I think that might have been my message to come forward. That when I see this barn with ABCs, where you can put ABCs on its letters, you take the ABCs. I can see all that. I can see who was my sister playing with it, and well, me. It's in front of me, and it's facing me, if you can call it facing me. But over here on the side of me is someone moving. I don't know. What's a sister? What's that? Like, what is a sister? Can't say it's my sister. I don't know what a sister is. So when I come, my sister, who I found out is my sister, was sitting there playing with me. My vision went to what it is now, what I call full screen. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know if you see your screen or not. I don't know. But that toy had ABCs. You could put on it and spell words with the magnet letters, like they used to put on a refrigerator, like people put on their refrigerator and stuff. The letters with the magnets on the back. Yeah. So I came forward for that. To me, I call it for that, but that's why I came forward for that. Letters, spell it. And I'm sitting on the floor playing with my sister. So learning to walk, I don't know nothing about it. First bite of some food, I don't know. I was already eating. I was already walking. Like I don't know, I feel I didn't learn to walk. I mean, I can say, of course, I'm born from my mama, and I learned to walk at the age she said I did, but you know, I'm just copying her. To me, that's when I came. I came after I learned to walk, or Wayne learned to walk. Well, I came already knowing how to walk. To me, I ain't never learned to walk. I was always walking. I ain't never learned to chew food. I was always chewing food. Nah. Whatever, Chad. I don't know what people be doing, y'all. Oh, well, let me continue this video. I'm talking about it.
But you at some point you more or less just have to. I mean, I justified it by saying it was part of my dissertation. So it gave me a little motivation. I mean, once you commit, you more or less have to do it. But I mean, this isn't difficult. Okay, it's not it's not something insurmountable to explain. So God lives in the spirit world. All of these beings by nature are in the spirit world. Now they can come over here, and they often do. I mean, God comes over both in terms of an audible voice and in terms of a physical body. We'll look at that a little bit later today. God can take people from here and transport them to that realm. I mean, this happens in the Bible all the time. But again, by definition, if you are disembodied, you belong in the spiritual world. You're a spirit being, a disembodied spirit being. Again, in the sense, in contrast to our normal terrestrial existence. Now we know from the New Testament and the Old, over there's some kind of body. Yeah, I get that. But we're talking about the human realm versus the spiritual realm. That's what an Elohim is. You don't call a person, Elohim ontologically. You might give them the title or something like the king. You're now like the son of God to me, that sort of thing. Again, because there was this conception in the ancient Near Eastern world that the king was somehow intrinsically related to the deity. That's just common knowledge, common for them anyway. So this is again why it isn't polytheism. Yahweh is an Elohim, but no other Elohim is Yahweh. That's what an Orthodox Israelite would have believed. Now you have, Israelite religion is like Christianity today. You have lots of people who call themselves Christians, but they don't all believe the same things. In fact, there's an amazing amount of variety. And some of them don't like each other, okay, because of certain things they believe. You know, this is just easy to understand. Well, it's the same thing in ancient Israel. Not every ancient Israelite believed exactly the same thing. But the ones who understood, and the biblical writers, again, they convey this idea that Yahweh is unique among the Elohim. So where Yahweh gets his uniqueness is in the way the biblical writers describe him and never describe any other ones. This is where you get, he's the lone creator. This is where you get, he's the sovereign. This is where you get, he's almighty, he's omnipotent. This is where you get these things. They're descriptions given about Yahweh of Israel that none of the other Elohim ever get. So your theology, your theology proper, to use the seminary term, is unaffected by this. So I try to get Christians again to, sometimes it's a bumpy ride because you're talking about gods. Well, I'm talking about gods because your Bible talks about them. Again, I'm not going to protect you from it, but that doesn't mean that you've been taught poorly in terms of who Yahweh is, who the God of the Bible is. He is unique. And they certainly would have agreed with that. So you get this issue, okay, what about none besides? We sort of reflexively interpret these statements as being statements of denial. That is, when God says there's none besides me, there's none like me, besides me, there's no other, that means all of the other Elohim don't exist. Or that they're all really people anyway, or they're all idols. Idols don't, they're just pieces of wood and stone and all this stuff. So they're typically interpreted as denial statements. We have a really hard time with that. Again, when you go to certain passages, I'm not going to take you through the whole Torah of Deuteronomy here, but just Deuteronomy 32. Let's just go out to 32:12. You have kind of a difficult problem here. And I'm gonna go to the NLT since I'm going to wind up there. The Lord alone guided them. They followed no foreign gods. Okay. Now, if we look at this language, there was no other gods with them. Okay, this is im with, that's the negative particle there. So basically, they're going through the desert, and they don't have any other gods there, with them. Right. This is one of the so-called denial statements. If we go to, let's go back to ESV here. No foreign god was with him. So switch back to NLT. Again, you get the idea. There's actually a dozen different statements about there being no other gods with, aside, besides, the God of Israel. This is one of those phrases. So there's no other God there. At least that's what we're led to think. But then you get down to verse 17. They offered sacrifices to demons, which are not God, to gods they had not known before. Well, wait a minute. Again, if we click on gods, if I can find my mouse here again. There we go. Let's get rid of this. We have Elohim. Okay, so the Israelites end up sacrificing to the Shadim. The Shadim are not God. They're not the God of Israel, obviously. But they sacrifice to demons, they sacrifice to gods, to other Elohim they had not known. So how is it? I mean, they're either gods there present or they're not. They're either other gods that are alongside Yahweh in the sense of existence, or they're not. You can't really have both. And if we track through Deuteronomy has several passages that affirm the reality of other gods, but then it turns around and says there's one besides. So how do we do that? Unless we want to see a hopeless contradiction in Scripture. Again, these are not denials of existence. They are statements of incomparability. And the two cases I like to illustrate this, I think it's the best illustration. Isaiah 47, I know these are probably somebody's memory verses or life verses here. Isaiah 47:1, 8-10. Quote it for me now. Zephaniah 2:13 and 15. The Isaiah passage has Babylon saying this, and the Zephaniah passage has Nineveh saying it. But both of these cities say, there's none besides me. Now, if you're going to take that language as a statement of non-existence, do you really have the city of Babylon saying, hey, I'm the only city that exists? There's no other cities in the world. I know you probably were born in one, but forget that. Okay. There's actually no other cities in the world. It doesn't make any sense. Same thing with Nineveh. There's none besides me. Well, of course there are. There's lots of cities in the Assyrian Empire, like Ninevites idiots or something. And again, the point is that they're claiming to be the best. They're claiming to be incomparable. There's none like me. Period. I'm superior. So Babylon, again, the prophet cast Babylon as vaunting herself as the supreme, the apex of civilization. And Nineveh during the Assyrian period, they think of themselves as the same. This kind of language, again, this is how we have to process it to avoid some pretty glaring contradiction. And again, I'm not cheating that because I don't want to see contradictions in the Bible. What I'm saying is that just makes the most sense, and it does. Monotheism we talked about, again, it's not a theological problem. It's a context problem because we don't, when we see God, our brain just works a certain way. We are not thinking like the Israelites. And if you've read Unseen Realm, I mean, this is the whole thesis of the book. I want the Israelite in your head. And I know it's going to disturb you at some points because it disturbed me. I get it. It's not always going to be comfortable. But you have to reach the point, I think, in your own study, if you're really, again, profound statement number 3.
And what Oklahoma look like? That's what I'm saying.
The right context for interpreting scripture is not yours. It's not your church's. It's not the history of Christianity. It's not the Reformation. It's not the Catholic Church. It's not John Calvin. It's not, just fill in the blank. All of these contexts, as good as they are and as helpful as they are not the context that produced the Bible. I would suggest to you that that is the correct context for interpreting the Bible, the context that produced the thing. Because when a biblical writer writes, when God prompts someone to write something down that would wind up in what we call the Bible, there was actually a reason for doing it. There was a specific occasion. There's a specific agenda. An agenda is not a sinister word. It just means you had a reason to do what you do. Okay, they have a reason for writing what they're writing, and they're in a specific time and place that is millennia removed from us. And here's the kicker. They're writing to people who live at the same time. Okay, because if they're not, I'm writing this down for someone that I don't know who's going to live 3,000 years from now. And Lord, give me vocabulary that a 21st century technocrat would understand, so that no one here understands it, because I'm not writing for my audience. I'm writing for some other audience. It just doesn't make sense. They're writing using what they know, the tools at their disposal, the knowledge they have, the context they're in. God knows that because God is pretty smart. Okay? God knows what he's getting. He knows what he wants them to produce. He's a big enough God to make sure they don't mess it up. And I want you to write this for these people right here, right now. Even if I know that what you're writing, well, part of it will happen, part of it's going to be in the future, they're still going to understand it. They can process it. Because if they can't, it defeats the whole premise of communication. So you either have a non-communicative Bible, that's the one I want, okay, or you have something that's like real. And I've I can't say I've often said it because I don't keep track of this thing. If you strip the humanity out of Scripture, you undermine inspiration.
Yeah.
And that might sound contradictory, but it's absolutely true. Because we define inspiration like it's an X-Files episode. You probably heard me say this because this is a hobby horse of mine. Pardon me, I'm going to go on it. But we have this conception where the biblical writer, wakes up, starts making breakfast, and then all of a sudden they're just zapped. Like their mind goes blank. They have no control over their limbs. The hand just starts flailing, and then they pop out of it and they look down. And they say, "All right." Man, I can't wait to read that. I bet that's great. Because I surely didn't pick the words. I surely didn't like write it so that it would conform to any known genre. I don't know what I did. My arm just started moving. Okay. You know, we have this weird X-file-ish view of inspiration. And the reason we do is because we want to affirm verbal inspiration, that the words matter. It's not just the concepts, it's the word. Okay, we get that. But we strip the humanity out of it in the name of, we think, preserving this idea over here. But it actually sets you up for so many problems in passages. Why do the Gospels all disagree on certain accounts? Why, even when they agree, do they have things in different orders? Why, even when it's in the same order and the same event, they use different verb forms in Greek? But the Holy Spirit said, watch this. I'm going to throw them a curveball now. Oh, this will be fun. 2,000 years from now, they're going to be scratching their heads wondering why I used an aorist here. Perfect over there. Okay, it's absurd. But this is the way we think about inspiration. That the Holy Spirit has to drop every word in somebody's head. It's absurd. And critics have a field day with it. A field day. It's easy pickings. Sorry for the hobby horse, but it's this thing that constantly irritates me. Again, why don't we view inspiration like we view canonicity? It's providence. Why can't God be in control of this person's life from the moment they're born, preparing them every step of the way? God knows what their life experiences are going to be. He knows what kind of home they're going to be born into. He knows what their education is going to be. He knows that they're going to make a left turn instead of a right turn. This is going to happen instead of that. God knows all these things about the way a person's character is molded and why they wind up where they wind up, good or bad, mistake or obedient. I mean, God knows all that stuff, but he's preparing this person along their path because God knows at a specific time, in a specific place, on a specific occasion, at a specific day, he's going to need them to write this thing down.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to be prepared to do it. They're going to be the right person for the job. Why don't we view it like that? Well, because that isn't as cool as an X-Files episode. I mean, well, again, sorry. Because it's just a constant irritation with me. And frankly, it is because I've seen so many people damaged, by again, what I poke fun at as an X-Files view of inspiration.
I have to write it myself.
Right. I mean, I get emails. I used to be a Christian until, or I had to give up on believing the Bible because, and then they'll tell you, it's like, really? Like, that's like a 2-minute answer.
I will have to write it.
But yet I understand why, because you were probably told this. And when you realize, the day you realize this doesn't work, this doesn't answer your question. In fact, it makes it worse for you. You just bagged it. That's what you did. And honestly, if I would have been you in the same set of circumstances, I could see myself doing that because I didn't know any better. So I tend to be a little ultra sensitive to this one. Another question: what about Jesus? All these sons of God running around that are Elohim. Well, what about Jesus? I thought he was the Son of God. Mike, this is heresy. Sorry, but I didn't write the Bible. I just sort of make you look at it. It's my job. What about all these sons of God in the Old Testament? I mean, look, the biblical writers are not dunces. They understand that they need to communicate that Jesus of Nazareth is Yahweh in the flesh. They know that they need to talk about him a little differently, and then they would talk about something else. Okay, give them some credit, and they do that. Okay, John 3:16. We all know this. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. We know because it's this crucial, creedal kind of verse. Okay, that articulates the gospel. For God so loved the world that he gave his what? Okay, so now we got a variance, which is the whole point. Only begotten, one and only. Then there's some other options. What's the Greek term? You get a gold star for the day. You know the Greek term. Monogenes. Yeah, a couple. I'm on a gold stars right now. Monogenes.
Monogenes.
Now, it used to be, I don't know if I have this up here. No, I'll just.
Monogenes.
It used to be that scholars
Also
thought
monogenes.
monogenes came from monos, only, okay, or one, and genao, which is a verb which means to beget, produce children, okay? And that's part of the reason why, like an old translation like King James would have only begotten. And it was a term that allowed them to distinguish, to our ear, because we don't use this vocabulary anymore, but to beget something actually doesn't refer to the moment of its creation or conception. There are different words for conception. They're in the Hebrew Bible, and you know, you can beget a child, but the child's already been in the woman for 9 months, you know, all this kind of stuff. So they thought that this is the best way to express this. Well, it turns out, you know, 150 years later, again, through paleographic research and archaeology, scholars find out, oops, it doesn't come from monos and genao. It comes from monos and gene, which is a noun. It's not a verb, and it means kind. So it means one of a kind. Okay, unique, only. Now that's a good word. Okay. If you're describing Jesus and you want to distinguish him from the other sons of God, who are obviously more than mortal, they're divine, you use a word like one of a kind, unique. Again, if you go to Hebrews 11:17, again, this is not another memory verse here. Let me just go to that real quickly. And, you know, if we did a search for, you know, monogenes, you'd find out, you know, there are other examples here. But I like this one because everybody knows the story of Abraham. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was in fact was in the act of offering up his only son. So if we click on only, we get monogenes. Now here's the question. Okay, we know who Abraham was offering up in the process, Isaac. Was Isaac Abraham's only son? No. He had Ishmael. He's not even the firstborn. So what does monogenes mean? It means he's unique. Well, what's unique about him? Right there in the verse, he is the son of the promise. Okay, that's what makes him unique. He's not chronologically first. He's not the only one. So monogenes is a really good word to use here because it pinpoints, it targets what's special about Isaac. Cosmic Mountain a little bit, and then we'll break. And we'll just keep tracking through because I do want to get the rebellion stuff, especially with this audience. But cosmic audience, again, refers to a number of ideas. Edenic vision, the whole concept of the image, you know, what's the image of God? Why do we have plurals in Genesis 1:26? You know, God said, let us create humankind in our image. What's the point, you know, of all this sort of language? Now, in the book, again, if you don't have Unseen Realm, I recommend you getting it. Obviously, I'd sure like you to read it. You know, just read the book. So long. God for lunch here. I have a few charts in the book. This is one of them, where I'm trying to illustrate here council terminology, divine council terminology in both ancient Near Eastern texts and other texts that shows up in Genesis 3 and other Eden passages like Ezekiel 28, because Ezekiel 28 refers to Eden. It calls Eden the garden of God, and it also calls Eden, you know, the holy mountain, the mountain of God. Well, why this language? You know, why do we have a watery mist? Why do we have seas? Why do we have gardens? Why is it a mountain? Again, it's because these are the elements of the stock description. This is stock vocabulary for places where in the ancient mind the gods were thought to live. Why do the gods live in gardens? It's an arid culture. So of course the gods live in the best places. They live where there's lots of water. They live where there's lots of food. They never want for anything. It's paradise. And to the ancient person, this is paradise, the lush garden description, because that's a lot of them never see anything like that. You get an oasis and it's kind of really small. We can't actually live here. We'll get kicked out because other people want to live here too. you get this whole situation. Why mountains? Because mountains were remote. Mountains put a distance between the deity and the riffraff, which is basically all of us. The gods don't want to be troubled with people. People are nasty, they're dirty, they're icky. I don't want to touch them unless I have to. Okay? This is why the gods are described as living in these places where people aren't. Why do we get gods in the ocean? Because people don't live there. Why do we get gods in Sheol? Because again, the normal terrestrial existence is not down there. Okay, you wind up there spiritually, all that kind of stuff, the realm of the dead. But the gods live where people don't, by choice. Okay, and again, the more positive of these is the garden of the mountain. So this is where the divine council lives. So Eden is actually a description. It's a description of God's abode, but an ancient person reading it would know God. I mean, we can read it in English and okay, God lives there. God at least visited there. He lived there initially. We get that, but what we miss is again the trappings of this is cosmic turf, where the divine presence is. It's a place that people ordinarily aren't and are kept away from and shouldn't be. This is the divine abode. It's not the human abode. Okay, humans don't belong here. But nevertheless, God comes to earth, creates this place, and plants in the garden, puts in the garden humans. Again, to the ancient mind, that telegraphs something. God wants people there for some reason. When they show up, okay, what's their mission? Okay, we take care of this place, but then we subdue the earth, the rest of the Eden is not the world, by the way. A lot of Christians have this assumption that Eden is the whole world. The description of Eden gets applied to the whole world. Eden has geography, Genesis 2. We'll look it up. Eden is a little portion of the earth. They're supposed to be fruitful and multiply and go out, make the rest of the world like this place. Okay, that's your job. That's your task. When we know what happens. But this is the divine abode. God wanted people there. Why the plurals? God says, while he's in the business of creating all this other stuff, let us create humankind in our image. Again, the reflexive interpretation, if you ask, well, why the plurals here? Most Christians, well, that's the Trinity. Now, if this was the only passage where you had divine plurality language, okay, we could live with that. You could guess, you could assume, you could read the New Testament back into the Old. It's not really a good method, but you could sort of live with it. The problem is it isn't the only passage in the Hebrew Bible that has divine plurality. And if you import the Trinity in some of those, like Psalm 82, you get really, really bad theology. But who's God judging in Psalm 82? Jesus and the Holy Spirit says they're corrupt, says they're going to die like, come on. It just doesn't work. God is announcing his intention. There's another disconnect. Well, if the members of the Trinity are co-eternal, in every theology class I ever went to, they were. If the members of the Trinity are co-eternal, why does God have to announce anything to them? Did they dip off? I missed that. Can you read? I mean, no. Okay, again, it's this little thing that just doesn't make sense. If they're co-eternal, they should already know. But God announces it. Okay, what's really going on is God is speaking to the beings, the members of his family who are already there. Who are they? They're the sons of God. Job 38. Sons of God are present at the foundation of the earth, all this language. God already has an audience. He already has a family. He says, I got a great idea. Let's make humankind in our image, in our likeness. But then when he actually does it, it switches back to singular. So God created humankind in his image. Why don't we have both? God is speaking to an audience. He already has a family and says, look, I want a human family too. This is our home. It's where I live. It's where you guys work. You live here because I made you too. And I want a family here. So let's create humankind in our image, in our likeness. But then when it actually happens, God does it. It would be the equivalent of me walking into a room like this. Okay, this is just for illustrative purposes. He knows what's going to be. And then I said, hey, let us go get pizza. Let us go get lunch. We're in California now. What does everybody eat here? Let us go get pizza. It's the universal, it's the food of the gods. ambrosia. Okay. Let us go get pizza. So I announced that to a group. I'm the lone speaker. And then we all get into my car. We all go to the pizza place of my choice. I pay, but you get to eat. Okay, that's what's going on in Genesis 1. The plural language connects us all. It connects us to God. It connects us to the other sons of God, because God made them too. And the whole imaging idea, again, real rapid fire here, is about representation. The image of God is not a thing given to us, especially if it's brain activity. Just the foundation of our ethics, I think, is totally undermined by our own Christian view of the image of God half the time. Because we want to say it's something like prayer and intelligence and sentience and self-awareness. Hey, the little 4-celled zygote, that's in the woman's womb there. Guess what? It ain't praying. It ain't thinking. It ain't doing anything, but it's there. Okay, the image is about being human. By definition, God creates a representative of him, of his, on this planet. That's you. That's humanity. Regardless of your intelligence, regardless of how long your lifespan is, regardless of any property, any quality, to be human is to be God's image, God's imager. I like to use it as a verb. I think we represent God. We do what God would do if he were here.
The one that can see.
We are him in that sense. We function as his representatives. That's why Jesus is called the express image.